Today, House Ways and Means Committee Chairman Richard Neal sued Treasury Secretary Steven Mnuchin and IRS Commissioner Charles Rettig to force them to obey the federal law that requires them to hand over any tax return filed with the IRS to the chairman of the Ways and Means Committee. In this case, the tax returns that the chairman is seeking are Donald Trump's. Chairman Neal's lawsuit says that the Treasury Secretary and the IRS Commissioner have been illegally refusing to hand over the Trump tax returns. The lawsuit says Section 6103F of the Internal Revenue Code requires in mandatory terms that Treasury shall furnish the committee with any requested tax return information. Enacted in 1924 in the wake of congressional attempts to investigate agency wrongdoing in the Teapot Dome corruption scandal, Section 6103F was intended to provide the committee with unfettered access to tax return information necessary to carry out its broad mandate to oversee Treasury, the IRS, and the nation's tax laws. Since its passage, the committee has routinely used Section 6103F for these purposes, and the executive branch has met its duty to comply with those requests. Defendants have now, for what the committee believes is the first time ever, denied a Section 6103F request in order to shield President Trump's tax return information from congressional scrutiny and refusing to comply with the statute. Defendants have mounted an extraordinary attack on the authority of Congress to obtain information needed to conduct oversight of Treasury, the IRS, and the tax laws on behalf of the American people who participate in the nation's voluntary tax system. The lawsuit insists accurately that the law does not require the chairman of the Ways and Means Committee to reveal any reason that the chairman is demanding any set of tax returns. But in the lawsuit, Chairman Neal did offer several reasons for the Ways and Means Committee to examine the president's tax returns. The chairman cited several public complaints Donald Trump has made about the IRS, both as a candidate for president and while serving as president. The lawsuit quotes President Trump repeatedly saying that the IRS has been unfair to him, and Chairman Neal says in the lawsuit that it's important for the Ways and Means Committee to investigate whether the IRS has been unfair to the president. One of the reasons Chairman Neal gives for examining the president's tax returns is to see whether the IRS system of auditing presidential tax returns is actually working properly. Since 1977, the tax returns of the president and vice president have been automatically audited. All 8 tax returns filed by Barack Obama and Joe Biden while they were in the White House were immediately audited. And you never heard them complain about that. But President Trump has complained about it endlessly. And so the committee is worried that the president may have interfered with the way the IRS audits presidential tax returns, because there is no law requiring presidential tax returns to be audited. It is just an IRS guideline that requires the audits. There is nothing in law that would prevent the president's IRS commissioner from blocking an audit of the president's tax returns. And so Chairman Neal's lawsuit says that the Ways and Means Committee might be writing legislation that would enshrine the audit of the presidential tax returns in law and give the IRS the irrefutable power of law to carry out an audit of the president's tax returns that could not be blocked by anyone in the president's administration. This is a very simple lawsuit. Chairman Neal is going to win this lawsuit at every stage, including any possible appeal to the United States Supreme Court. It all turns on the meaning of the word shall, and you don't have to go to law school or be a Supreme Court justice to understand that word. Treasury shall furnish the committee with any requested tax return. It may take a while, but there is absolutely nothing that can stop Chairman Richard Neal from eventually getting the Trump tax returns. Joining us now is a senior member of the House Ways and Means Committee, Democratic Congressman Lloyd Doggett of Texas. Congressman Doggett, I can't even pretend for a few minutes with you that there's any suspense in this litigation other than how long it will take. The law is just too clear. It's just too simple. But I will say I learned a few things about the history of the law in this masterful complaint today, including this very important fact that I wasn't aware of, that the audit of presidential tax returns is just a guideline of the IRS. It's been going on for so long that I assumed it had slipped into law, but it is not actually protected by law.
That's right, Lawrence, and I agree completely with your conclusion as one of the nation's leading experts on the tax code yourself, that we will prevail in this lawsuit.
The leading expert on TV.
Yes, well,
don't let me do your tax
background
returns.
in this,
Yeah.
but clearly we will win this. The question is, when will we win it? And whether it won't be this year before it's finally decided, because the Trump administration has made it clear that their policy of total obstruction will carry them to every appellate court, and they will delay as long as they possibly can. So I hope we will have these returns by this time next year. If the Supreme Court decides to take the case, which they could, it will be challenging to get them before the end of this Congress. We're dealing, of course, as you have just explained so clearly with your last segment, we're dealing with a lawless administration. And whether it is child abuse on our Texas border, which is rampant with this administration, or whether it is ignoring a clear command that shall means shall, this administration doesn't intend to comply with the law. And so I'm pleased that finally, after so many months, we have this action filed. You know, here we are approaching the 4th of July, and this is the first and only action Democrats have initiated in court against this administration's total obstruction policy. I agree with your prior comments that this administration responds to strength, and it's important, not just in this lawsuit, but in other actions against this lawless president, that we are firm and forceful, and that we insist on compliance with the law, which this president has ignored. We can't be weak and timid and lackluster.
And I think we should clarify for the audience that Donald Trump, the president himself, has nothing to do with this lawsuit. When the day comes that the court orders the IRS commissioner to hand over those returns, they're not ordering Donald Trump to do anything. They're not ordering the president to do anything. There will be no moment of defiance that the president could suddenly attempt to exhibit, because the lawsuit has nothing to do with him. It'll be the IRS commissioner who hands over those returns by order of the court.
I agree with you about that conclusion. Whether Donald Trump and his minions at the White House have influenced what Secretary Mnuchin has done here is another question. As you recall, because you covered it on your show, the Internal Revenue Service lawyers looked at this and they said just what you said tonight, shall means shall. We win the lawsuit. Secretary Mnuchin and the Commissioner Rettig ignored that opinion, went out and got a second opinion from the president's new personal taxpayer finance lawyer, Mr. Barr, the Attorney General, to justify their action. They will fail eventually. I hope it will be soon, and that the courts will expedite this proceeding, because we need to see the returns for a legitimate purpose. You also note that in addition to the audit function there on page 24 of this 49-page complaint, the complaint sets out other very legitimate grounds that expert witnesses told our committee justified doing what's being done here. We need the returns for a number of reasons, but certainly to see that this audit guideline has been followed and that it's put into a statute.
And if the litigation drags on for long enough, it could just be that on the afternoon of the next inauguration day, the new IRS commissioner hands over those returns, because without the Trump Justice Department standing in the way, all of this stuff would just collapse.
I hope we don't have to wait that long. And in fact, there's now, as you know, another route in that the New York State Assembly has taken action. I believe this is headed to Governor Cuomo's desk for signature, that we could at least get the parts of the return that were filed in New York State. And I hope that will be pursued eventually also, because we need this information sooner than the next inauguration. We need it as a part of accountability for this administration. Here at the 4th of July, we need to see that our Constitution doesn't have tank tracks all over it, as Pennsylvania Avenue will apparently have after this great celebration honoring Donald Trump.
Congressman Lloyd Doggett of Texas, thank you very much for joining us tonight. Really appreciate it.